Do you still want me to help with this thing we've been talking about?
You goddamn right I do! And when it's all done, you all be more than square with me. You have my word.
When I finished watching the first episode of Stranger Things, I knew exactly how I'd be spending the next 10 hours of my life. I mean, I had to keep watching. And whether it's Game of Thrones or Gilmore Girls, that urge to binge watch is a compulsion many, if not most of us have experienced. It's also exactly how I felt during the opening hours of Mafia III's heavily narrative-driven campaign. Unlike many sandbox shooters, Mafia III takes great pains to introduce its major players and flesh out their motivations. Rather than rush you through some hackneyed setup so you can skip straight to the carjacking and cover-based shooting, the narrative takes its time, lingering on scenes that make all the action that comes afterwards feel far more meaningful.
You weren't lying about setting up a tax center.
Key to running a successful black bag operation is plausible deniability, which is why I stole all this shit from the FBI.
Certain players will undoubtedly recoil when confronted with the harsh, shameful realities of America's past, especially since Mafia doesn't sugarcoat any of it.
Well, I ain't gonna bow and scrape to no just to sell a little dope.
But the setting is handled deftly, and it genuinely adds to the story being told. The historical context colors the events and informs certain aspects of the characters, though the campaign's primary focus remains squarely on protagonist Lincoln Clay's deeply personal quest for revenge.
This is a one-way road, Lincoln. And once you start down it, there ain't no turning back.
Unfortunately, I was less impressed with Mafia III's gameplay, which is mostly unremarkable, at least during the game's very earliest portions. As with most third-person open-world games, much of the action consists of running, shooting, and driving. At first, I found Lincoln's basic movements to be relatively clunky and imprecise. Similarly, I found the aiming slow and unresponsive, even when I attempted to increase the analog stick's sensitivity. I developed a better feel for both over time, but many of the mechanics remained disappointingly simplistic. Enemies, for example, generally stand in place or pace on short, predictable loops outside of combat. And in combat, they generally grab cover and stay put, periodically popping up to fire off a few shots. I only noticed enemies flanking on a handful of occasions. Ultimately, the action I've experienced so far has been fine. Unoriginal and imperfect, but functional nonetheless. Over the course of those first several hours, the campaign opened up very gradually, adding and expanding gameplay options at a relatively slow pace. Once I gather better weapons and recruit more associates, unlocking the political side of Lincoln's power grab, I'm hoping Mafia III's gameplay will develop complexity strong enough to match its already stellar story. And there's plenty of time for that to happen. I've only played roughly 6 hours of a game that will, in all likelihood, span dozens of hours. I still need to explore the expansive city of New Bordeaux and determine if it holds anything of interest beyond story missions. I still need to dismantle more rackets and dig deeper into the strategy underlying the campaign. And I still need to find out if Lincoln's story can maintain the same caliber of excellence it achieved out of the gate. Be sure to check back next week for my full review.
But when Lincoln Clay went after the mob, he inflicted more damage than all the wars and hurricanes combined.